when Benedict Allen and his dog Cashew set out on the adventure of a lifetime. His childhood dream soon becomes a battle to survive.
Suddenly I found the situation out of control. Wham! I was having to fight for my life.
Stranded and alone, he must fight his way through 100 miles of the most inhospitable jungle on Earth.
This place seemed intent on killing me.
He must face nature's most deadly predators.
Terrifying, waiting for something that was going to spring out at me.
And endure the madness induced by the forest.
This was a dream that I'd followed very selfishly, and now it was going to be the death of me.
22-year-old Benedict Allen has always been a dreamer, and he's living his biggest dream yet. He's following in his father's footsteps and becoming an adventurer.
My dad was a test pilot, and it was very exciting having this glamorous father. He used to fly these planes over the house. And I just assumed that one day I'd be an adventurer of some sort, just like my dad. I just wanted to be like one of those great explorers like Cook or H.M. Stanley or Livingstone.
And for his first expedition, Benedict has come to the greatest wilderness on Earth, the mighty Amazon rainforest.
As a child, I read in my books about El Dorado, which was this mythical land of gold. But no one found El Dorado, and I thought one day that would be my destiny.
His companion for this epic journey is a stray dog he's befriended along the way.
I was lonely, and that dog reminded me of my dogs at home. And I called him Cashew, which was Indian for dog. So he was simply dog to me. But he began to be more than a dog, he began to be my friend.
Despite his youthful enthusiasm, this is Benedict's first major adventure. He's attempting to traverse over 1,000 miles of dense, uncharted rainforest. So he's relying heavily on 2 local guides to help him survive.
They taught me how to feel comfortable in the forest, which to me was a confusing place. They began to show me what I could eat and what I had to avoid, how to hunt. I was utterly dependent on these 2 men and their extraordinary library of knowledge, because I knew nothing, absolutely nothing.
For 3 months, they head deeper into the vast rainforest and are nearing the supposed location of El Dorado, the city of gold. But Benedict has been warned of the dangerous illegal miners that have been drawn here. And there are troubling indications that they are not alone.
The signs were ominous from the beginning. The water, just empty cachaça bottles. Cachaça's a sort of cheap rum. There was a sense that there were outsiders in the forest. I'd been warned that these were bank robbers, thieves, people accused of murder. They'd all headed off into the forest because here was a chance of making a quick buck.
Despite Benedict's trepidation, they must find a place to camp, as night is falling.
We went off through the trees, and suddenly we stumbled across this small settlement. But whereas I was worried, my two Indian guides were absolutely entranced. I remember one of the Indian guides picking up a can opener and wondering what that was. Suddenly, this character, Mendez, arrived. He was the classic gold miner. And I just felt I've got to get out of here.
¿Qué estás haciendo aquí, entonces?
Estamos buscando El Dorado.
¿El Dorado?
Estamos viajando al sur por la boca del Amazon.
No, mi amigo. Si viajas para allá, muy peligroso. Los rápidos están lucidos, pero puede ayudarte.
Mendez said to me, look, I'll be your guide. I'll take you down the river towards El Dorado. Furthermore, I know a track. You'll be able to walk from the river to the outside world.
¿Está bien? Divertimos.
And I thought, well, maybe I've misjudged this gold miner. Maybe he isn't that bad. But I thought I should go along with this plan. I'll be heading in the right direction at least.
Bien.
Benedict reluctantly agrees to the offer and settles down for the night. But as the night wears on, he has a growing sense that all is not what it seems.
That night, I woke up in my hammock feeling that something was wrong. Just an uneasy feeling, and I remember thinking, I've got to check on things. So I put on my boots, potted down to the river to see if my canoe was still there, see my supplies were there. I think effectively I was making sure that my exit was okay. And I heard this conversation going on between Eduardo and Mendez, and they were discussing me. They were saying, why don't we go and slit his throat right now?
Porque no rajamos la garganta ahora.
Los indios que tendrán problemas si lo matamos.
No. A ellos le dan igual.
I had a rising sense of fear, and adrenaline began thumping in my ears.
Venga. Lo hacemos ahora.
¿Quién va a ser?
No lo haré cuando está durmiendo.
And I realized I'm just going to be killed. These are my last moments alive. I just thought, go, I have to run, get out of here. Gathered my hammock together, my mosquito net, ran to the canoe. And suddenly, I was in the darkness in my canoe with my dog.
And with his loyal friend Cashew, Benedict makes it away from danger.
My first thought was relief. Then I had this terrible, dawning realization that I wasn't safe at all. I was surrounded by forest. It was the middle of the night, and I was very, very alone.
Without his guides, Benedict is now stranded in over 2 million square miles of rainforest, with no one to show him the route out.
I really was not at the end of a nightmare, but at the beginning of one.
Cashew. Let's get out of here, boy.
I paddled upriver for maybe an hour, and I thought, I'll just calm down, I'll just pull into the side. Made a little camp and thought, I've got to come to terms with this new situation. And the situation was, my childhood dreams were over. And I felt, I've got to get out of here, got to get out of here. And there was blood pounding through my head. I did not know what was out there in the forest. And I didn't know myself, really. I didn't know whether I had it in me to survive. As the first light came up, I could see this forest, absolutely immense, and there I was in the middle of it, absolutely alone. It was terrifying that first morning. But after a little while, I thought, no, come on, pull yourself together. It's the first day. So I began looking at my supplies, trying to work out whether I had enough to get me out of the forest.
Good boy.
And by Benedict's estimations, he has enough rice, sugar and dried meat to last him approximately 2 weeks. And he has a mosquito net, a machete and a survival kit. All the basics he needs to stay alive.
If I wanted to see my mum and dad again, I was going to have to take a chance on finding a trail out of the forest, and that's the option that seemed to be the only sensible one.
But Benedict knows that searching for a route out of the forest means heading off into completely uncharted waters.
I was actually going into the interior. I was heading upriver. So for the moment, until I found that trail, I was heading into oblivion. As I paddled away upstream, I was feeling more and more hopeful. Then, suddenly, there were rapids. I remember thinking, come on, Benedict, pull yourself together. You've got to get out of here. Spent a lot of time dragging the canoe through the rapids. It was immensely hard work. It just seemed relentless that I was just fighting all the time this river.
After 3 days on the river, fighting countless sets of rapids, the harsh reality is sinking in for Benedict. He's heading deeper and deeper into the forest, and there is still no sign of the trail.
By the third day, all my early enthusiasm had drained away. I kept on thinking, how many rapids are there? They weren't marked on any map. It just seemed relentless. Physically, I felt a wreck. My hands were in ribbons and blisters all over the place, burns from this rope. The big question mark was how long I could keep on going, and it wasn't that I was running out of food, I was just running out of belief in myself.
By mid-afternoon, it seems Benedict and Cashew have cleared the worst of the rapids. They can now continue to search for a way out of the forest.
I remember starting to paddle my way into the clear water, but I hadn't quite got far enough. Suddenly I found the situation out of control. I started going backwards. It became absolutely terrifying. I realised that I was fighting for my survival. I had to keep this canoe upright. But then, wham! The canoe shattered with the impact. Everything now ended up in the water. The dog, the supplies, and me. It was a moment of absolute terror as I realised not only was I losing my possessions, but actually I was having to fight for my life. I was gagging on the water, trying to get my breath. Finally got some purchase and waded my way towards the riverbank. I remember just trying to take in the situation, and the situation was that I'd lost virtually everything I needed in order to survive, and lost my companionship, Cashew, the dog. Yeah, it was a sad moment just because he was my friend, my companionship. He was everything to me.
And as Benedict sits on the riverbank, he realizes that along with Cashew, his hopes of survival are slowly drifting away.
First thing that struck me was I didn't have any food. Then I realized I didn't have a hammock, didn't have my mosquito net. There were so many worries going through my head. Would I end up starving to death? Would I die slowly of malaria? It was difficult to imagine how I was going to end up, but whatever way, it didn't look likely that I'd ever see my family again.
Benedict knows that no one will be looking for him, because his expedition is not due to finish for at least 3 months. And with no food or medical supplies, he'll be lucky to survive a week.
The situation was beautifully clear in a way. If I stayed where I was, I thought I would just die. I thought I've just got to get out of this place. I thought, what have I got to get me out of the forest? There was an old rucksack. There was a water bottle, a machete, but above all, my survival kit. Fishing hooks, fishing line, distress flares, spare compass. So key, simple things. I got out my little notebook and I made a little map. Anything I can remember, I put onto this map.
Benedict realizes that the river is no longer a viable route, and the only possible way out is to walk directly into the jungle and attempt to hike out on foot.
So I drew a little dotted line, and that would be my route out of the forest. And it was a huge, huge moment as I walked away from the sunlight into the unknown.
And Benedict heads into one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, the Amazon rainforest.
The forest that I saw seemed a very different forest from what I'd remembered. very, very thick, difficult to get through. And so I thought, I've got to keep absolutely clear about what I'm meant to be doing.
Benedict realizes that traversing this jungle will be a monumental task, so he'll have to use every last scrap of experience he has, if he is to make it through here alive.
And I reckon I walked absolutely straight, maybe 100 miles. That would take me to the outside world. So I thought, I'm going to count every single pace. When I got to 100 paces, I made a little notch in a stick. And that way, I'd know that I was nearer help.
For hours, Benedict fights his way through the jungle. But as night falls, he can go no further. And when the sun goes down, the searing temperatures plummet. So he makes a shelter, using a technique he learned from his guides.
I thought, oh, it doesn't look too bad, really. I felt a little bit of pride. And then lay down and realised that I was wet. There's more dampness coming up from the ground. I lay there, sweating away, and then felt incredibly cold.
The brutal reality is that Benedict isn't prepared for this at all. In the 100% humidity, he has no way of keeping dry or warm. And with his mosquito net gone, no way to protect himself against the deadly disease he fears the most, malaria.
Then the insects started moving in, and a long night began. I was feeling absolutely terrible, wrung out, because I'd been awake all night with the insects. And I had to light a fire and dry out my clothes just to fend off this clawing wetness which wore you down. I felt very burdened by the forest. I just thought, I've got to get out. I've got to get out of this place.
Benedict resumes his hike towards the outside world, but so far has only managed 4 of the 100 miles he has to traverse. It's been 4 days since he last ate, and he's beginning to weaken.
I was starting to feel hunger pains. And I knew that unless I sorted out some sort of way of getting food, I was just going to die of starvation. I started to think how I could get nourishment from this place that seemed intent on killing me. So I thought, okay, I've got to settle myself down and build a few traps.
And Benedict knows that if you want to trap an animal, you have to find its trail.
You make 2 parallel lines of sticks that you jab into the forest floor, and you funnel the mouse along. And there's a little bit of bait that you put at the end, and it triggers a mechanism, and boom, a log comes down and flattens the mouse, and you get this flat rodent for your supper. It's so time-consuming to even fashion these things, but waiting for an animal to come along, I found absolutely exasperating. I thought, I'm totally incompetent here. I don't belong in the forest, and furthermore, the forest seems to know it. It's almost like I'd been found out. Every species here has learned to survive, and those that aren't good enough die. And I'm going to be next, because I don't know how to cope here. I can't even make a simple trap. I began to dread every evening. It was a question of trying to light fires, and I had to find water to boil so I could drink it. And all of this was taking time when I was already exhausted from trying to make progress through the forest. I used to dread the loneliness of night and wish for the morning again, but in the morning, no relief. I felt like a hamster on a treadmill heading to nowhere.
Benedict has managed to fight his way through 25 miles of jungle, a mere quarter of the distance he believes he needs to travel to reach the outside world. The only food he's eaten are the tips of ferns, but it's not enough, and he's beginning to experience the first effects of starvation.
My hunger was really bad. I felt weak. I was doing less and less miles every day and feeling more and more confused.
And weakened by hunger, his body is becoming too frail to withstand the jungle's constant onslaught.
Insects were more of a problem, and so were the bites. Some of them were starting to fester and weep. All of this was sort of visible evidence that I was being attacked. And suddenly, there was a palm tree. It was a Malaria palm. And I remembered how my guides had taken the berries and they'd made a wonderful purple mush. Suddenly I had all the energy in the world because I saw hope now. I drank down this wonderful, nutritious liquid. God, it felt so good to have my stomach full.
Benedict is so weak that his stomach is unable to digest this rich berry pulp. And as starvation takes a stranglehold, his body is beginning to break down.
It was a terrible situation because on the one hand, I could eat, but if I did eat, I'd feel more sick. It didn't seem to be solving any problem, and it was a sort of hellish situation.
Despite his sickness, Benedict pushes onwards, but he's getting weaker by the hour, and it's not just the result of malnutrition.
Gradually, I realized I was succumbing to something. Sweat was becoming more and more obvious to me. Looking at my hand, I'd see it shaking and shaking. I was sinking into a delusional state because I wasn't able to control my thoughts.
After almost 2 weeks of relentless attack, Benedict has finally succumbed to his biggest fear.
I thought, this is the taste of malaria that I'd always been warned about. And now it's my turn to experience it myself as someone who was exhausted and starting to starve to death.
The malarial parasites are destroying Benedict's red blood cells, starving his body and brain of oxygen. And knowing he faces almost certain death in the forest, his thoughts turn to his family, over 5,000 miles away.
It was a sort of sadness at first, feeling of terrible defeat. I thought no one's going to be able to imagine what my last days were like. I had a feeling also of disappointment. I'd beat my mum and dad. But the truth was, this was a dream that I'd followed very selfishly. And now it was going to be the death of me. As the fever began to kick in, my progress became even slower, and it was becoming a fight just to put one foot in front of the other. And my hope of getting beyond the trees was fading away. Suddenly, I had this feeling that there was something out there, as if something was stalking me. And I thought, come on, Benedict, keep control, you're losing it, you're losing it. Suddenly, I heard this rustle, and my worst fear was that it was a jaguar. And it was terrifying, waiting for something that was going to spring out at me.
Come on! Yeah!
I fired off a couple of distress flares. Bang, bang.
Come on! Yeah!
And nothing. And then I heard a whimpering sound.
Well done.
Incredibly, after vanishing in the rapids 2 weeks before, Cashew has tracked his old friend through 40 miles of rainforest. And all at once, the horrors of his situation seem to drift away.
It suddenly felt like I'd been given a miracle, a sign of hope that everything was going to be okay again. I had someone who could understand what I was going through. That restored a lot of myself somehow that I'd lost, that had been taken away by the brutality of the forest.
Cashew's reappearance has lifted Benedict's spirits and reinvigorated his determination to get home. But he's desperately malnourished, fighting a killer disease, and rapidly running out of time.
Now, I was 3 weeks into this trek 3 weeks of really hardly eating anything.
After walking for 70 miles, Benedict is now in the advanced stages of starvation, and the malarial parasites are rapidly colonizing and destroying his body. He knows that his condition is reaching critical.
And I was so aware that I was running out of time. Cashew seemed to be lagging more and more behind. And I thought, I can't have you as a passenger.
Cashew! 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 Cashew!
I began to think, hold on, there's all this flesh on you. But it was inconceivable that he could ever be my food.
Cashew!
As the day wore on, I began pining for water, and I realized I wasn't just starving, I was dehydrated.
Benedict's life is now hanging in the balance. The combined effects of starvation and malaria mean that he must take on more and more fluid, but it's becoming ever harder to find. And whereas a normal person can last 3 days without water, in his condition, he won't last 24 hours.
I was desperately licking leaves, I was licking stones just to get a bit of water into my system, just to sustain myself. I found myself side by side with the dog, actually lapping water like a dog. I thought the animal in me is coming out in order to persevere.
Become like you, Cashew.
I was in a desperate state. By now, it was almost impossible just to keep on walking. It was a real crisis point. Mentally, I had less of a grip on what was going on. Where I was, whether it was day or night, what was happening, what was in my imagination. It was very, very clear that I had less and less sense of who I was.
By now, Benedict is so emaciated, and the malaria is so advanced, his brain is beginning to shut down. And as his clarity and sense of self dissolves, he knows that his death is creeping ever closer.
I was in blind terror, really, that these were my last sane hours. I write repeatedly, no need to die, no need to die, no need to die.
And Benedict realizes that unless he eats immediately, this could very well be his last day alive.
One way or another, the moment came when I just thought, this is it, this is the day. The day when I can actually gather myself together, pick up my machete and kill the dog.
Without the nutrition that Cashew will provide, Benedict is a dead man. He now has no choice but to kill his only friend.
It felt like I was an executioner at this stage. But I remember this terrible cowardness of walking up behind it, knowing I couldn't actually face killing the dog in front. I struck it a blow on the head from behind. Suddenly, there was a way out of this hell. For now, I'd concentrate on the most nutritious parts, the kidneys, the liver, heart, and I put them on the fire. I just sort of quietly ate them, and rather sorrowfully, actually.
But Benedict cannot ingest the meat. The malaria is making his stomach reject anything he forces into it. And the realization dawns. He's just used his last chance.
When I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did get worse. I lay on the forest floor, racked by pain. My liver, my kidneys were being attacked. I was fighting just to keep myself sane.
Benedict's malaria has now reached the final and fatal stage. The parasites are aggressively multiplying and destroying his vital organs, causing his body to collapse. Within 24 hours, he will experience first coma, then death.
This was the moment when it could all end very, very quickly. I had this rising sense of panic that I had to get out of the forest. I had to do whatever it took. Whatever happened, I had to keep moving. Keep on putting one foot in front of the other. I kept on going, making pitiful progress, and sometimes no progress at all. Couldn't even think straight. I couldn't even see my compass. At that moment, I suddenly thought, well, I'm just never going to get out of here. It was just too big to fight. And I was losing that fight.
Benedict simply cannot go on. He's just too weak, too ravaged by disease.
It was a terribly lonely moment, thinking this is the end. And suddenly, amongst all this despair, this confusion, this feeling of being trapped in this prison, a sight that will always stay with me. I saw this cut branch. The cut itself was blackened, so it had been cut some time ago, but had been cut by a human. I realised there was actually quite a few of these branches. This was actually the edge of the outside world. I started investigating, and there was a trail. And then extraordinary thing of just seeing daylight, and it's still emotional to me, just this reconnection with the outside world. The one thing I've been looking forward to, praying for, imagining, was suddenly there, and it was absolutely overwhelming. And I found myself in the back of a garden. There, ahead of me, was a little hut, and there was a little man in front. And he was just standing there with a look, not of welcome, but of horror. And that was my last memory.
Having recognized the symptoms of malaria, the farmer nursed Benedict for 3 days before he was driven to a hospital in Macapá, where he made a full recovery. Benedict returned home to be reunited with his parents 1 week later.
My life was never the same again.
And Benedict has been exploring the world ever since, fulfilling his dreams of becoming a renowned adventurer, just like his father.
I've been going off to the jungle, going off to the desert, going off to the Arctic, pushing myself to the limit, trying to touch that experience that I had that was so profound. That has always haunted me, and it's something that'll always be with me, and it's steered the rest of my life.